When attempting to measure the impact and ROI of your SEO initiative, it's important to understand how much of your traffic comes from your brand name. Why? Because it represents customers who directly sought you out by name, and therefore has little to nothing to do with your SEO efforts. Let's dive into it. Why do you need to know how much of your organic traffic came from your brand name, and what is branded search anyway? Branded search, or a search for your brand name, is when somebody puts in your store name. If you're John Smith Ford, then if someone types in John Smith Ford, that was a branded search. Your SEM vendor may have a branded search campaign to cover your name and make sure that competitors don't bid on it, but you already own your brand name. You own it in organic traffic, and you own it in every way possible. When you search for your store name, you come up first organically, you come up in the map pack, you come up everywhere. So why do you need to bid on it? You don't. You also shouldn't include it in credit given to your SEO vendor or your SEO solution. Because again, you already own that. You owned it before you had an SEO solution, and you'll own it long after whatever you're doing right now. Your brand name is secure, and you don't need to do SEO for it. You do need to measure around it. I talked in another video about how your organic traffic can be inflated by content around an informational topic like F-150 towing capacity. Well, another way that you can inflate your traffic and give yourself a false sense of security is if you have more branded traffic coming to your website and perhaps none of the SEO impact that you hoped to have. An example of this would be, let's say you run a radio spot and you're advertising your store. When someone's driving and they hear your name on the radio, they have nothing to click. Traditional advertising methods lead to more interest, more awareness of your brand, but they don't lead to direct clicks to your website. What happens? More often than not, people don't remember your URL or your domain name. They simply search your store. Maybe it's John Smith Ford. And when they do that and they click on John Smith Ford inside of Google search, that is a branded click to your website. That click should not be credited to any vendor, SEO or SEM, because you already owned that real estate in search. So how do we find that in Google Search Console? Thankfully, it's very simple. When you're in the search results section, click on the New filter at the top of the page. Click on Query, and then enter your brand name as the filter. What's going to happen here is it's going to filter down to only queries that contain your brand name. That'll tell you how much of your traffic came from your brand name. And perhaps the more useful way to measure this is to look at what traffic did not come from your brand name. Simply go back to that filter and flip it to query does not contain your brand name. Now you're going to be looking at all of your clicks from queries that don't contain your brand name. Now you're measuring your potential SEO impact. Now, what if you have a complicated name or it's hard to spell? The way that you can account for that is do queries does not contain, but you might need to create a filter that has multiple possibilities. To do this, you use a regex expression, and this is a bit in the weeds, but it's fairly simple to do. You simply need to put all of the variations that you can think of with a bar or an or in between them, and what that will do is it will filter out all variations of that keyword. So if you're John Smith Ford, you might do John, you might do Smith, you might do John Smith. If you had a more complicated name, include misspellings. Now, what if your name is not something like John Smith Ford, and instead it's Atlanta Ford? This becomes significantly more complicated because people are prone to searching a metro or geography and the brand because they're looking for a dealership in that area and don't necessarily know to come to you by name. So you gotta measure this with a grain of salt. If you're Atlanta Ford, you may not be able to exclude this so cleanly. If you're in an outskirt area of Atlanta, perhaps, you probably can filter this because not that many people are going to search for the small location outside of a metro. They're going to focus on the major metro. So if you're unlucky and you're the dealer with the major metro brand name, this can get a lot more complicated and you're going to need to play around with it. If your store name is a geography outside of a major metro, then I recommend just filtering it out, and that will primarily capture only branded search traffic in that filter. So to recap, you need to identify your branded search traffic using Google Search Console. You then need to eliminate that branded search traffic from your total to get a clear picture of what traffic came into your website that was not branded. From there, you can use those queries to better analyze, was it informational or was it transactional search, and eliminate the branded impact. In the next video, we're going to continue in Google Search Console to look at how we identify SEM cannibalization and where SEO and SEM can overlap to create wasted spend. We'll see you there.